Hello. Thanks everybody for joining us for Solo to Squad. I had to remind myself it's been such a full day of great sessions. I'm like, where are we? We are in our last breakout of the day, and it's going to be a good one. While you're coming into the room, can you add your name, where you're from, maybe your LinkedIn? I know there's been some good networking going on throughout the entire day. And then to give our speakers their full time, I'm going to jump right in on our little intro. So again, welcome to From Solo to Squad, Building Your Dream Team. We're going to address the elephant in the room. You call yourself a solopreneur, but you're not really doing this alone, are you? I assume some of you have hired virtual assistants, a bookkeeper, a web designer, maybe even a business coach. And you might also be working with contractors, collaborators, or strategic partners. At Lettuce, we'd love to be part of your squad too. We can handle your taxes and financial operations so you don't have to spend a lot of money on an accountant or bookkeeper, or even worse, spending hours on trying to do it yourself. We can help take it off your plate so you can focus on really building the right team for everything else. And the question isn't whether you should be building a team, it's how you build a team in the first place that can support your growth without sacrificing the autonomy that made you want to be a solopreneur in the first place. So we've brought together a fantastic panel. Khalil Dumas is the founder of Exec Now, and he specialized in helping solopreneurs build sustainable businesses. Peter Emery is a founder and fractional marketing executive that has built multiple teams in full-time and in independent roles. Jessica Lackey is a founder that has scaled her businesses strategically while leveraging talent and is helping others do that now. And Brandon Smithrick is a new solo who just popped out of his full-time world to help other creators and be a full-time creator himself. So a little housekeeping before I hand it over. This session is set to run about 45 minutes. As our speakers present, please engage, type questions in the chat or in the Q&A box. If there's a question that you like, hit +1 or like, and we can help identify the more popular questions. In the panel to the right, you will see a thing called handouts. If you click on that, there's a great handout from Jessica. And then if you visit the resource room in the expo, you can see a full list of books, including Jessica's new book, as well as handouts and offers from our session speakers from throughout the entire day. I'm sorry, the summit speakers from throughout the entire day. So we'll stop listening to me trip over my words and instead hand it over to Khalil, Peter, Jessica, and Brandon.
Thank you so much, Lisa. Really excited to be here today with so many great folks that I've gotten the pleasure of getting to know. Really going to start today with mindset and readiness. Just thinking back to 3 years ago when I launched into the solo space, I remember how many shifts I needed to make, not only in my mindset, but trying to really understand, was I ready? So I want to start there and jump right in. Brandon, I'm going to turn to you. Let's start with this big one here and go around here. How did you know it was time to stop doing everything yourself? And mainly, how did you know it was time to start being a solo? Why did you choose to launch into fractional work? When was that moment for you?
Yeah, good question. The short answer is too many 3 a.m. nights. I would say the more strategic answer is when I realized I was obsessing over the little things. And I was like, you know what? This is a process that I could easily have someone help me with. So yes, I was at a 9-to-5 director level and then also building. I've been building for like the last 3 years. And it wasn't until 3 months ago I went full time. And that was also an indicator, just because, you want to be a great founder, you want to have your business do well. But if you yourself are not healthy, I think that's the biggest indicator. So for me, it was everything from, wow, I feel so tired, or you're like, you know what, I don't feel as sharp as I need to, or you know what, I'm burning the candle a little bit too much. And the part-time business is doing great. And if this is what it is part-time, what could it be full-time? And for me, that was the biggest mindset shift.
Oh my God, I couldn't agree more. I think I shared very similar sentiments. It was, what if I gave this my all and stopped code switching and task switching all day long? Jessica, I'm curious for you, how did you know it was time to stop doing everything yourself and start to bring some help in as well?
I noticed that I was spending time doing things regularly that weren't my highest and best use. So I was setting out sales carts. I was plugging in integrations from my checkout to my email marketing. And when I started doing this 2, 3, 4 times, I said, I can now start to outsource this because I have some predictability as to what I run, how I work. And that's where the outsourcing and delegating started.
Peter, curious if you have anything to add.
Yeah, for me, I would say it's really hard to sort of admit to yourself when you need help. And I think that's the part where the solopreneurship becomes more of a team. I think everyone has offered some really great, ideas in here. There's a lot of mental hurdles, and we'll probably get to that next, so I can chime in then.
Yeah, I think that's big. I think the limiting beliefs is where a lot of the challenge happens. And Jessica, I know you had a lot of really good insight into, really creating an environment to keep those limiting beliefs in check. What helped you kind of overcome some of your limiting beliefs? And if you wouldn't mind sharing, what were some of those?
Well, the first belief is that no one can do it as good as I can. And in some cases, that is true. But what I think is really important is understanding what needs my best self and what doesn't. And there are some things that I do well that others can do maybe less well, but it still gets the job done. And I think that was the biggest fear of no one can do it as well as I can. And I'm like, sometimes it doesn't need to be done as well as I need to do it.
Yeah, absolutely. Brandon, curious if you have anything to add to that as well.
I do agree with that. I call it your foundering, right? Like you want to be in every part of your business. And for me, when I launched my newsletter business, same thing. I think the thing that helped me there was realizing, yes, I could do it, but there is probably someone who's like a specialist in this area. And I think more so I want people who are specialists who can help me, because my kind of toxic trait is I want to clone myself, right? I want to clone myself, and I can write over here, I can advise over here, I can consult over here, I can create content over here. And I think seeing how much my capacity was limited, I had to figure out, all right, this is a configuration project. That's not my zone of genius. My zone of genius is writing, the way I think, the way I help brands. I can have someone else configure this entire thing. And when you look at the time, the output, and the money, I think those are the things you kind of just weigh against each other. That helps make those decisions a bit quicker, in my opinion.
Yeah, and when we're thinking about those mental hurdles that hold solos back, I definitely fell into the trap with Jessica because it was just easier, less friction for me to just go do it. But as a twin dad, that led to me being, more tired in the evening. That led to, me giving up my workout routines. I had to sacrifice so much to try to do it all. Peter, when you think about those mental hurdles and what was holding you back from building a team and delegating, what did you do to kind of start to overcome that limiting belief?
Yeah, I mean, the most common mental hurdle I would say as a solopreneur is when you're building a team is the fear of losing control and the uncertainty around delegation. So many solopreneurs fear bringing others on board might compromise their vision or quality. Also, it's the mixing values to understand different values are coming together. And to overcome this, really, it's shifting the mindset from doing everything myself to empowering others to amplify my impact. So, and I think about starting small, delegating specific tasks you're less connected to, and trust the process. And recognize that building a team is about creating leverage, not losing control, and that its success depends on cultivating trust, clear communication, and shared vision. And also around the process too, the mental hurdle of the process, the legal entity, the insurance. Am I a solopreneur? Am I an agency? And it all comes down to solopreneur readiness.
Yeah, and I can take myself right back to one of those days where I got to see how, leveraging or releasing some of that control was helpful. There was a day where I was pitching and then I had to, actually do the deliverables. What I found out was, I delegated the SOP creation and the proposal creation to one of my teammates. So I no longer had to do that at the end of the day. I could just focus on the deliverable. And Jessica, you said something really great about readiness that honestly, I probably still struggle with in some areas, but something you said if you can't maintain a weekly meeting with yourself to lay out priorities, you're not ready to hire. Can you go a little bit deeper on that? Because I think I didn't start there. I definitely was really unorganized when I started to overhire, which is what that led to. But I'm curious, kind of what your experience was as it relates to readiness.
When we're hiring and leading a team, we have to always be thinking about what are they going to be working on? What's the biggest priority for them? What's their, what I call standard work, the repeatable things that you have SOPs for, but what are sort of more of the ad hoc tasks? And you have to get ahead of that for yourself in order to get ahead of that for your team members, because there's, it's not going to set either of you up for success to have, throwing tasks across the wall, I think is one of the things that we can do because we're so busy. So we're just like, all right, let me just add this to the task list. But if we're not, thinking ahead about what resources are they going to need? When is it due? What am I really asking for? That's where tension arises, because sometimes you'll get back what you didn't ask for or something different. You feel like maybe they spent a lot of time doing something that you weren't expecting them to do, but they're only operating with kind of the guidance that's been given. So I think this is a really important time to say, can we as entrepreneurs, I know this is an impossible task, but can we slow down a little bit to say, what are the most important things? Am I setting up this new hire for success? And am I setting our team up to function really well? And all of that comes down to being able to stay ahead through a routine planning process.
Yeah, I think that routine planning is key. And the question from Sheila is, how do we create systems to delegate? I mean, I think that all comes down to, again, your systems. And if you haven't built those systems, even for yourself, like you're saying, you're going to struggle to do it for a number of other folks. So when we talk about, doing the wrong things or hiring too early, what are some of those common mistakes that usually happen at that 150 to 250 threshold? And Peter and or Jessica, looking at you guys to give me some detail there.
I'll start on this one. There are 3 common mistakes I see at the 150 to 250 range. One is trying to outsource sales because you're busy delivering. 2 is trying to outsource all your marketing. And 3 is outsourcing your financial fluency. I super want you to outsource with a partner like Lettuce, the mechanics of your books, getting your bookkeeping done, filing for that S-corp, understanding your, paying yourself. But you have to understand the margins in your business. And too many entrepreneurs I see don't know what to be looking for in their financials. I don't need you to know how to file your taxes. I just need you to know what is in your taxes so that when your business changes, you can adapt with that. But then sales and marketing at the 150 to 250 level, they're still buying you. Right. Mm-hmm. I mean, who's been on the other end? And if this is anyone in the audience, I'm sorry to call it out, but on the other end of a LinkedIn DM that you get from someone and you're like, wait a minute, this is your VA DMing me. And this is not you. And I think as you scale, you can have the people, I don't know if this actually works for anybody, but let me get you 30 leads in your inbox every, like it's your personal network and it's your personal story and it's the how you do what you do. And those are things that are really hard to outsource for when you're selling your own knowledge and skills, which at the 150 to 250 level, that's kind of what we're doing.
100%. I mean, just to put detail to it, in my first year as a solo, I made just over about $150,000. When I looked back at my books, I had spent about $40,000 on outsourcing, which when I look back was way too much. And I was focused on more vanity things, PR, marketing, not the things that were actually going to get me time back. Peter, curious, where did you maybe go wrong, and where do you see most people going wrong as well?
Yeah. And are you talking about specifically building the business side or?
When we're going back to the question here of, hiring too early and what solos should not be kind of outsourcing too early.
Yeah, I would say in terms of, hiring too early is, it all comes down to what your SOP has in place, or your SOW. What's your SOW, for instance? Like, what does your SOW say? And I think for me, it's understanding the people you've already worked really well with and how you can bring them in to part of your community. I think that's really important. I'm pretty new at the fractional world. I have been a consultant and now just come over to fractional CMO. So I'm sort of learning the steps in getting to the next tiers, but ideally having 2 to 3 clients and then understanding how shared resources could work amongst those clients, I think would really be impactful. And noting that the people you're hiring too at the 152, 250, that they also have other jobs. Some of the people I work with have full-time jobs. So I'm just raising my hand, trying to shake the trees and say, hey, do you have time for my, 1, 2, or 3 projects?
Yeah. I mean, I have some, Jennifer's asking about, the industries we're in. And I would say a lot of this advice is also industry agnostic. And I think going back to what Jessica said, what's super key is people are buying from you. I can't tell you how many times I've tried to delegate experts through me and folks coming back and saying, hey, I'm hired to work with you. And so I want to kind of flip to Brandon, because Brandon, you just kind of went through this.
Yeah.
And I'm curious, what are some of the roles that you hired first? And if you had any hires remorse, I guess, if you had any lessons where maybe you would have hired differently, even in the short time that you've transitioned over.
I hired a bookkeeper. I think kind of to Jessica's point, that's not my zone of genius, but it's still something where I want to know my margins. So it's not something that I totally remove myself from, but someone who can make sure I'm expensing what I should be expensing and not overspending in certain areas. And someone who's also able to check you, because if you're running your whole business, you're going to justify everything you can along the way. But someone that's a gut check, especially in the financials, where it's such an emotional, and money is so emotional for us as just people, where someone's in your books and they're asking you, why did you spend this on this? And you have to justify it. As you're saying it out loud, you're like, you know what? I actually don't have an answer for that. So I think that's super helpful. I hired an assistant who can easily keep everything from contracts to invoices. Invoices are, I think, one of the most important things. That's how I get paid, right? But at the same time, that's a process where I can show them the process, have a Notion dashboard that explains everything, or even record a Loom video on my process to do things. Once I can teach someone how to do this task, I can do that task. Graphic design. I realize I'm super creative, but there are other people who are more classically trained in this area than I am. And I think brands hire me because of the way I think, because of the way I write, but brands aren't hiring me because of the way, I design a graphic. It's a graphic that's going to help explain a framework or something. So those are the couple of roles I immediately hired for. Everything else is really freelance, whether that's videography, whether that's, I need more assistance for a bigger project. And I just take those, case by case, project by project. But really just making sure I can hire a team that helps me quarter to quarter. And I think about these smaller roles as more project-based things.
That's super helpful. And I think a wrinkle in kind of building your dream team over the last couple of years is this, entering and emergence of AI. I think that's something I'm really curious to hear from you guys a little off the cuff here. Something that I've noticed when you talk about delegating, when you talk about doing this for the first time, I actually find it right now very helpful to start to build some of that scaffolding using AI first before you bring someone in to build it from scratch. I found that, whether you're fluent or not, these tools are user-friendly enough to be able to integrate things as easy as note-taking, things as easy as email follow-up, right? Starting to, create the system for your EA to come in, start to create those systems for our financial teams to come in. Curious, how have you guys seen the emergence of AI in conjunction with starting to build this team? Do you think it's helping reduce cost? Are you using it at all? Curious kind of how you all have been, integrating AI to build it as part of your team as well.
Well, actually there's how I use AI for myself, but then how I use it for clients occasionally. So I work with clients that are scaling, and we'll take a process and we'll use AI to say, if I were to hand this off to somebody, what would be the assets or the things I would need to build in advance? So when you have, Brandon talks about his invoicing process, what would be some of the frequently asked questions that you would want to have in a document or prepared to answer, so that when someone steps in to handle that process for you, you've kind of done the pre-thinking about, these are the questions they're most likely going to ask. This is how I can get that information in front of them. So I use AI as a pre-hiring partner at times to say, how might I sequence these tasks that I want to get off my plate? What do I need to have prepared to make that a seamless transition? So it's been actually really helpful in helping me think through the SOPs that I need to build, or the material that I have to have ready, the systems, as it were. I use AI for other things like, podcast show notes and things like that. But, it's really been a great tool for helping the pre-hiring stage.
Anything to add, Peter or Brandon?
Yeah, I'd like to add just that I also think about that in terms of, what AI tools do I use for myself, Jessica, and then which ones do I use for my clients, and which ones cross over. And I think we're all still in this test and learn phase where we're trying to understand, where we subscribe, we do the free subscription, and then we subscribe and then we might forget about it. So suddenly we're charged $120 for the entire year. It pushes us into longer terms. So I think I'm at the absorption rate right now, which is pretty high, to test and learn, to understand what's good for me, what's good for my clients, and where does it add value.
Absolutely. Brandon?
Yeah, for me, I use AI a lot within my personal work. I also use a lot of automations. I think that's the biggest thing, right? If you do something repeatedly, how can you automate this? Even using AI to scan my emails and possibly already pre-draft an email for me when something comes through. But I also like to tell my team, I think we get very comfortable with AI. We start to do something called cognitive offloading. Basically, I don't get better at a task because I have AI do said task for me. Writing is so inherent to who I am. I want to always get better at writing. So I don't want AI to write for me. I want AI to critique my writing and help me do it better. One thing I definitely use AI for was to create all my SOPs, because I'm really good at the framework or the step-by-step, but I'm talking in Brandon language. And if anyone reads this, I want them to be able to understand it. So I had AI make sure, like, if you were coming in for the first time and you were very green, make sure this is clear step by step by step, and ask me questions to make sure I'm missing anything, right? I use AI as a business partner in that sense.
That's really helpful. And going to come back to you, Peter, here. I think for putting a bow on AI, I think I know what I'm getting. At the end of the day, with these tools, I know what they're going to do for me. I think one of the harder challenges is when you're hiring 1 to 5 people for a project. Some people you might know, some people you may not know. How do you kind of balance that, hiring people versus new contractors? I would say I overhired initially with people I didn't know. With people I did know, because it was more comfortable for me, but they couldn't really do the job well, versus kind of finding new contractors that I knew could do the job really well. So we talk about team composition. How do you go about thinking about the difference between bringing on people you've maybe worked with and testing out new contractors?
Yeah, I would say, well, in terms of, there's a lot of niche talent platforms and communities. So a lot of people, go to Upwork. And for me, I sort of question, because you'll find talent way overseas, and you're already, like, the time barriers are a big block. I'm on the West Coast, and for East Coast clients, it's already that 3 hours. So imagine working with someone that is, 8 hours time difference. But Upwork, in terms of, where solos can find quality contractors and support. So freelance platforms can be really good. And I would say talent pools too, like the hidden talent pools. Word of mouth is still really powerful. I'm in this Fractional CMO group on Facebook, and I'll post something into that group, and I will get a lot of good responses, and I'll get a lot of just, people that aren't the right fit. But it's the word of mouth is really powerful within our own social networks. And then there's the whole AI powered matching and vetting. So AI is just playing a bigger role in matching solos with contractors who are a great fit for projects. I just found out yesterday someone got a job through ChatGPT with AI SEO. So someone, now we're going to see more kind of uptick in people getting hired through searches and through prompts.
Jessica, really curious on your perspective on this as well.
When I'm trying to find people, I think it's important to distinguish, are you looking for specific project support, or are you looking for kind of more generalist support? For specific project support, where I know what I'm looking for, I can clarify expectations, and I'm going to go look for a specialist, as Brandon said. And that can be someone I don't know very well. If I'm looking for a generalist, I tend to find people in my audience. I find people in my networks where if I'm a little less clear with my expectations up front, and I maybe haven't done as much of the planning and the prep as I can, there's more of a personal relationship there that can be a buffer. So my current team member is someone who's in one of my communities. I love his systems thinking, and I said, hey, I want to hire you because I transitioned teams earlier. So I think it's do you need a very skilled specialist with very clear expectations for what they're doing and sort of like clear parameters, or are you prioritizing a bit of that like personal relationship and rapport? And that's how I think about, do I hire someone I know and I think as you start to, and I think Peter, you mentioned this before, your team doesn't just have to be people that are on your payroll or on your Zelle every month. If you don't have full-time employees, they can be the copywriter you work with every 6 to 12 months. It can be the graphic designer who you do projects with. My copywriter and my graphic designer have been with me for 3 or 4 years now, but they're part of my extended team, even though they're not in monthly invoice.
Yeah, no, I definitely can really take myself back to where I sit now. And when I started, I definitely over-indexed on expensive generalists because that was something I could just use to move fast. Whereas really, I would say to anyone who's in that first 1 to 3 years, you should be really project-based and really hiring specialists. And I think on the specialist side of the house, they're that for a reason, and they cost a little bit more. And so I think that was a big shock to me as well, was kind of making that switch. Did any of you all kind of experience that? And if so, did you kind of fall into the trap I fell into, or did you have something else you'd like to share as well?
I think you just can't hire too many expensive specialists before you need them.
Yeah.
Who else here spent 5 figures on a website in their first year because someone told you it was going to be a sales machine and it was just going to sell while you slept? Because I fell into that trap. The next time I spent that kind of money on a website, I knew exactly what needed to be on the page. So I think it's really like hire specialists, but don't believe the super hyped up promises that it's going to magically transform your business. Really say, am I going to get the results from this investment? Or is this something I really need to wait on? This isn't for my stage of business, at least not at this investment level yet. So like specialist in law, 100% worth the money. Accounting specialist, 100% worth the money. Again, that like outsource sales, automated CRM thing, specialist, but not worth the money, in my opinion, for at least in my first couple of years.
Yeah, I just want to add on to that because I definitely think the overspending is a byproduct of shiny object syndrome. You definitely see your business one way, and really that could be like maybe your 3-year plan, but you're like, you know what? I'm a business now. Why don't we have this, or like we're a consultancy, let's do this. And you don't realize like, you know what? That should come later. Let's build this foundation first, and then let me build upon that. And I think that also comes from like we've preached hustle culture, right? You got to hustle versus like build culture. We should really be telling entrepreneurs and solopreneurs to build strategically. Everything works as a building block. So once you have this and people know you for this, never lose this. Make sure you add this on because people also want your work and they just love working with you. But I think a lot of businesses jump into the business pool, or like a lot of solos jump into this and they think, wow, when I worked at companies, they had a whole team for this. I probably need to build out a whole team for this. And you probably don't.
Yeah, no, I think it's spot on. And pivoting a little bit, and this is an area that I starred and highlighted. When we talk about culture, and we've been talking about systems, but culture, I think solos really forget about how important redefining and really defining culture is. Just to give you an example, when I left 9 to 5 in that first year of solopreneurship, I recreated that same environment, right? Overworking, overextending, doing too much. I didn't take the power back and say, hey, I get the chance now to design my work and life around what I'd like to do, kind of regardless of the money that's coming in. I'm curious, is there a such thing as culture one? And how do you guys define that? I'll start with you, Peter, when it comes to solos. And did you fall into that same trap I fell into, which is kind of recreating, I guess, the environment that you're trying to get out of?
Yeah, I worked in basically like building brands and employee engagement programs. So like, how do you teach people to live the brand? And you're kind of putting them into a place of here are the core values, and here's the mission, the vision, the values, and how do you live it? And because we as solopreneurs have that, but we might not be communicating that. And I think culture, to me, often relies on full-time employees and shared office spaces, because there's an intention and sort of a modern approach, where there's, people that meeting at water coolers, like in the kitchen, and coming together and sharing their sense of purpose together. And so we're a little fractured, we're coming together on calls. Maybe not all of us are even coming together, maybe it's siloed. We were talking about specialists just a second ago, and how do we include, is there a sense of inclusion in the specialists in the broader conversations, or do you just keep them in your lane? Because if including them, then suddenly you're paying them. So you got to be mindful of efficiencies. But I would say with the shared office space that I was just talking about, is culture is a mindset, not just proximity. And I think basically, building culture with contractors is about creating a shared sense of belonging and purpose, regardless of physical location or employment status. It's really about fostering a community built on shared values, open communication, and mutual respect. I'm working on my own kind of mission, vision, values, the branded house, so people can understand how I like to work. It's usually something we all see in full-time jobs. We're given that brand toolkit, and it's like, oh, this is how they do it. This is what we do, how we do it, and why you should care. And I really want contractors I use to be part of the team. So I'm building that out myself. I need to double down.
I love that you mentioned the water cooler. One of my favorite Slack channels I have with my team is a water cooler channel. So you're allowed to drop whatever you want, whatever funny GIF, whatever funny story is going on. And it actually is probably my favorite channel. Jessica, I'm curious on culture. How do you approach culture as a solopreneur? And what have you found that works and maybe doesn't work?
I think one of the hardest practices to think about is the communication style, because I don't know about y'all, but when I was in corporate, if my boss sent me an email at 10 p.m., I was expected to respond at 10:05 p.m. And so I think thinking about, particularly that's kind of where, go back to my original conversation on planning, what is your expectation requirements for communication? Where do you communicate? How do you communicate? When you hand over a task, how do you as a team acknowledge that they've received it? What's your communication standards about when they show you progress? We don't want to micromanage, right? Because that's not fun for anybody. But also, if we are a little more distributed, what are your team norms around communication, response time, and how do those reflect the kind of business that you want to build and the team members you want to work with? And that's something that we can do. I have some people that I work with when I was starting out that work as a contractor, where we all kind of worked on Saturday mornings because that was when we had some time. And so we knew to respond. We were all kind of responding on emails from like 9 to 12 on Saturday mornings, but Sundays, no emails were sent, no emails were responded to. And that was like a really important part of that team's culture.
Yeah. Brandon, curious if you have anything to add.
Yeah, it's funny because my brand designer now is in Lisbon. So it's also this thing of like, I don't care where people are, as long as you're great, I want to work with you. But almost like I want to hire people and bring people onto this team that naturally I just think embody the essence of like why people want to hire me. Like you're a bold person, you're unapologetic, you're like a no BS person, but you're thoughtful in your work. And I think when I was even building out my team, that was just really important, I guess, values of who I want to work with, but also people who just enjoy the things I enjoy. Like I love to travel. So like no matter where you are in the world, if you have a Wi-Fi connection, you're good. So as long as the work's getting done, that's just the point. Like I don't want to micromanage. The way I might have my process may not be your process. As long as we're able to clearly communicate, deadlines are met, clients are happy, we're good. And there's always going to be growth areas for everybody. I just think it's more so building out those principles and key things early on.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And again, culture is all about just getting started. I think I hear far too often, like, I just don't even know where to start. Part of it is just doing the best with what you know right now and starting to learn. I will say, I think all of us here are probably still trying to fine tune culture as people come in and out. I think that is always a big issue. Now, I wanted to get, with the kind of 10 minutes here, I wanted to get into more of the practical side. I think it took me about a year or so to fully understand contracts and legal considerations and how to approach all of this with part-time workers, with clients. Jessica, I'm curious kind of how you think about that practical side of some of the things, even including accounting. When is the appropriate time to start to bring these folks on? I wish if I went back, it would have been at the start, just so I could start learning then and there. But I'm curious kind of how you set that timeline and priority.
So this is where I think like delegating small chunks and deciding whether or not what of the administrative task you want to take on. You can hire someone as a contractor that invoices you versus you having to set up your own billing systems. I would definitely talk with a lawyer first, especially if you're going to bring someone on that talks about your systems. This is where password management becomes really important, and really deciding what you're going to allow people to have access to. ChatGPT is actually great for helping you think through the plan. But I would say build up trust over time, but also that's going to match someone's learning curve. So, don't go from 0 to 60 in any of your systems, in any of your tech, in any of your financials as you bring someone on before you see if they're the right fit. So, build trust over time, and then that increasingly gives you more access over time. So I don't think you don't have to wait to hire someone for different things until you have it all buttoned up, but just be aware of kind of what you're giving someone access to.
Yeah, Peter, curious how you approached it as well.
Yeah, I would say for me, it's about control. So I need to get there, Jessica, but I do the onboarding. I do all the onboarding, and I'm not sure, Brandon, where you like specifically sit with the actual tasks themselves. But I really want to make sure everything's coming from me as the leader versus a VA or someone else that I'm setting it all up. And I just need to get to the point where I'm giving access to someone, to Google Drive, to all these docs, to that one person. And I'm not quite there yet in the journey, but so I'm handling, all the negotiations of contracting. I'm using ChatGPT to actually inform me of changes. I do have a primary agreement that I use. Attorneys can be $400 an hour. And so, using them for maybe that primary agreement, and then using ChatGPT for nuanced language, I would say. But I have yet to release that control to someone else, as Jessica's saying. So, it's on me. It does create more work, but I like to check the boxes, and maybe it's just, releasing the control, I guess.
It always comes back down to control. I think that's a big theme here. And want to take a moment too to remind everyone to drop questions in with this remaining time, and we'd love to get to it. More of a selfish question to you all, and Brandon, I'll start with you. I think a big thing for me was the budgeting side of all of this. I think that's a part of this that kind of never is talked about, is some of the financial commitments and investments that you have to make as you're starting to grow your business, delegate out. How do you kind of balance investing in support versus kind of keeping overhead low? And how do you even do that when you don't have a full financial forecast? Curious, like, kind of what your journey's been so far since you just jumped in.
Yeah, I mean, for me, I literally have a number each month that needs to be hit just for everything to be good. And I will say I'm getting better at maybe not saying, let's pay for the subscription outright. I definitely think, if this project comes in and this is the cost of the tool, or like whatever it is, I can justify it anyway. So like, yes, we need to go, let's fly to Cannes because we're gonna get business in Cannes. No, you don't need to do that. So I definitely want to make sure that even in my own business, I'm trying to keep costs very low. And my wife is on my team now, and that's, she's the one who checks me just to make sure that everything's good. That's probably the easiest. But just making sure that, I'm not over indexing at the same time. Yes, money can be good, but if you're spending just as much as you're making, then it's pointless.
Yeah, curious if you have anything to add there, Peter.
Nothing to add. Yeah, nothing to add on my side.
Jessica, I know a big piece of this, and I know the folks thinking about this, even myself being years into this, I always am thinking like, where do I start next? Curious to hear a little bit about some of the things you're leaving behind as a handout, which everyone here has access to download.
Yeah, so I think about all the tasks in your business as either core and adjacent, core to how you make money, adjacent to how you make money, and then complex and simple. And I really encourage everyone to, before they delegate, really brainstorm and brain dump all the things that you are doing in your business and where do they fall into this matrix and quadrant that you'll see in the handout. The first thing I always ask is like, what can you just stop doing? Because you probably don't want to spend money on delegating it if that activity doesn't actually get you clients, or it's not leading, I outsourced to a VA, a community that I shouldn't have been even be running in the first place. But then look at the rest of the things on your list and say, what's the most urgent thing to get support with right now? And it may be delegating to someone that you bring onto your team as more of an ongoing support. It may be setting up systems to bring on someone to hire. It may be actually increasing your skills in sales through coaching. So I really just want people to like brainstorm all the things that they're doing and really say, what can I stop? And what's the most effective way to get support and what really moves the needle? That's where I want to give people this framework to start thinking about what should they keep and what should be handed off to a specialist, a generalist, or a system.
Fabulous. No, I appreciate that. And we'll do a couple rapid fire here. I had one question come in, how do you handle hourly billing versus retainer structure, as well as kind of one-off projects? High level, I would say from my side, really focusing on a project based on what you're looking to accomplish. Typically, those folks will have their retainer or their hourly set, but I would always say negotiate. Everything is negotiable, but curious, Peter, Brandon, if you have anything to add to that question before we move on to the final question.
Yeah, I would say, I work, I try not to work hourly. I try to do more of a retainer structure, especially if I'm if a startup hires me to build their marketing discipline to be the fractional CMO. I'm learning more about upsides too. So if you hire me and I drive X amount of new revenue to the company and I've increased conversions, what does that upside look like? And I'm getting some education through a business coach on that and what I need to look for. But the project, most of the projects I'm doing now tend to be 3 to 6 months. And then the retainer sort of takes on after that, where there's, kind of a phase 4, 5, or 6. And it just, it's more maintenance. It's like, here, I built this engine for you and I'm going to maintenance it for you. And I'm going to make sure it's running. So that's kind of how I look at it.
Awesome. Well, we'll do rapid fire here. Brandon, I'm going to go to you, then Jessica, then Peter with this final question. What's one thing someone can do this week if you're thinking about building their team, whether it's mindset, practical first step, a system to put in place? What would you recommend?
Eisenhower matrix. That's like the easiest answer. That will help you. Just Google that. That will help you figure out what should I delegate, what should I not delegate, what do I want to own. You can even do it where you have a Google sheet of all the tasks you do. And do you want to lead that task? Do you want to be an advisor on that task? Do you want to delegate this task? Are you fine with someone owning this full 360, right? Does this task give you energy or take your energy, right? Just figure out every single thing that comes with your business. And then that helps you understand, have basically a clear list of like what needs delegation first.
Fantastic. Peter.
I would say, document. I'm thinking about time management, because it can easily slip away from us. And I'm thinking about document your time and identify bottlenecks. So I would say this week, dedicate 30 minutes each day, probably at the end of each day, to meticulously track how you spend your time. Use a simple spreadsheet or a time tracking app for that. But I think time management and burnout avoidance go hand in hand. So if you're able to balance your time better, you can avoid the burnout avoidance, which is a whole other category of things that I've given a talk on before.
Fabulous. Jessica.
Create a doc And every time you reference something that you tend to reference all the time, your LinkedIn profile, your website, your newsletter list, just start creating a doc where all those things are going to live, because if you haven't hired a VA yet, they're going to need that doc. It saves a quick reference for you, but they're going to need it someday. So start putting your brain onto documents. They'll need it at some point.
I would say mine is to really get to know yourself, and don't be afraid to get to know some of the scarier parts of yourself. I think all of that manifests through your business. So focusing on you and your growth is always super important, and something that I think a lot of solos may lose track of. Guys, I really appreciate all of the knowledge we've shared today. Really want to thank Lettuce again, not only for simplifying all of our finances, which is something we all run out of time to do, but bringing us all together to share these wonderful tips. Huge thank you to Peter, Jessica, Brandon, and Lisa here behind the scenes. And feel free to download the handout from Jessica as well. I'm about to go do that as well. But Lisa, curious if you have anything for us.
No, just a thank you to all of you for your time and your wisdom. And I hope to see all of our attendees in our closing keynote.
Awesome.
All right.
Thank you, everyone.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.